let me mention another one of the sins that you've committed. You invited noted white supremacist, quote unquote, Jared Taylor to lecture one of your classes and subjected your students to the presence of this fellow, noted white supremacist, in the words of Dean Ruger, and thereby made them feel, in effect, unsafe, made them feel that they couldn't be trusted, couldn't trust you, I should say, that you couldn't be trusted to treat the students of color fairly. What do you say to that concern, Amy?
Well, first of all, Glenn, none of the students in my class complained. There were, something like 10, 12 students at that session. They asked really good questions. They gave him a real hard time. Some of them engaged in discussions with him after the class. They had exchanges after the class. I mean, they aren't the ones complaining. Isn't that strange? They weren't traumatized. They weren't harmed. They weren't hurt. So think about that. The second thing is, Glenn, think about how utterly preposterous this objection is, how alarmingly stupid, okay? This is a class in conservative political and legal thought. One of the sessions was devoted to the historic and current far right, in our nation, which is part of, conservatism properly understood. I mean, you could say that it's the far reaches of it, but it does exist. There is an organization called American Renaissance. There is a person named Jared Taylor. And that Jared Taylor is a fairly sophisticated and articulate spokesman for whatever point of view this far right supposedly represents. Now, when I ask the students, can you articulate to me what the belief system of these so-called white supremacist groups is, they can't tell me. They don't know. They are completely ignorant. So we have this thing, Glenn, called education. And what is the purpose of education? To inform students, to enable them to understand what is going on, and specifically in this course, what is going on the right end of the political spectrum, what people like Jared Taylor believe, what their positions are, what they want, what they think about race and other issues that are pertinent to our nation's future. That is why Jared Taylor was invited. And here's the other thing. I asked, the law school, can I bring this speaker in and will you pay for a lunch? Yes. All right. They didn't do their due diligence until after the fact.
Wow, I didn't know that. You had already asked and gotten consent to bring him in on the school's dime.
Yeah, and because of COVID, I didn't bring him into the classroom because there was too much red tape. So I decided to have a luncheon in a nearby restaurant, which was actually a lot more fun. And we had a very good session, and students learned something about the subject matter. So think about what Dean Ruger is saying. He's saying, we're going to have this Committee on Public Safety now at Penn, where we're going to review everything that students hear and what you assign for readings, because they also objected, you're not going to believe this, to my assigning an interview with Enoch Powell, who's a 20th century British conservative politician, known for his critique of third world immigration. Right, and was a very sophisticated and articulate person and is well worth reading. That was also a basis for penalizing me too. I am going to be sanctioned because I had my students learn and read something about the subject matter of my course, which they voluntarily took. Think about that and think about the implications of that, Glenn. That's right.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I'm not a fan of Jared Taylor in every respect. He and I have corresponded. He is what you say. He's intelligent. He's articulate. He's well-read. He's thoughtful. He's also a racial nationalist on my reading, a white nationalist who is defending white people from what he takes to be the undermining effects of the move that we've had over the last half century toward, greater inclusion and diversity and all of that.
But Glenn, nobody's asking you to agree with him.
Yeah, I understand that. I accept your point.
I understand. I mean, I said to my students, the fact that we're hearing from someone or reading something doesn't entail that you have to agree with it. I mean, you could say that about my whole course.
But you do, don't you agree to a great extent with Jared Taylor's many of his concerns? That's a question, and if I'm wrong about it, tell me. I mean, you are to some degree sympathetic, are you not, to the racial realist kind of perspective about there being differences between populations defined by race that are relevant to social outcomes? You have some sympathy, do you not, for the reaction that Jared Taylor is giving voice to all of the impositions that are being foisted on white people, quote unquote, by the diversicrats?
Well, Glenn, let me ask you a question. How is that relevant to whether I should be fired for having my students learn about Jared Taylor's position and beliefs? How is that relevant? Okay, I mean, I am still trying to figure out what Jared Taylor is actually saying. And, Jared Taylor is someone I know. I've socialized with him. I've talked to him. And I am trying to nail down, what his belief system is and what vision he entertains for the future of our country. I am still learning about that. So I'm not sure whether I, quote unquote, agree with Jared Taylor. I am a race realist. But so are a lot of people. I mean, so's Charles Murray, so's a bunch of people who study differences between populations and ethnicities and groups. Anybody who studies, psychometrics. I mean, there are dozens and dozens of people out there who you could call race realists. I guess they all need to be banished from the university.
Well, some would say so.
Other issue.
Some would say so. They would. The Southern Poverty Law Center would say so.
But that's what I disagree with. That is what I disagree with, and I take a stand against that. And once again, I'll go back to the question you asked. It's interesting that your first impulse was to ask me, well, don't you agree with him? And I would say, well, what difference does that make? I have them read dozens of people in my conservatism class. You could say, well, do you agree with this one? Do you agree with that one? Do you not agree with this one, that one? Who cares? My agreement or disagreement with any particular writer or theorist, and I can give you a laundry list of the people that we read in that class, everyone from Edmund Burke to Michael Oakeshott to Wilmore Kendall to James Burnham, people, of course, our students have never heard of before, which is, in itself shocking. And they always say to me, wow, you opened my eyes to a whole nother world of thought, right? One that has been kept from me for 16 expensive, extravagant years, and that I never knew existed. What does my agreement or disagreement have to do with that?
Well, I'm going to give you the answer that I think would be forthcoming, which is that anybody who agrees with that threatens me. Anybody who thinks that there are natural differences between the races in intelligence passed on from generation to generation through heredity that are pertinent to accounting for the different occupational distributions, underrepresentation in the techie professions and so forth, is a threat to me. Those ideas, those white supremacist ideas, threaten me. They undermine my sense of security, not just in this university community, but in this nation. And those ideas need to be understood for what they are. They are racism. And we're against racism. We're anti-racist. We're committed to anti-racism here. That's the answer. You're agreeing with Jared Taylor is relevant because Jared Taylor is beyond the pale in the minds of so many. And to the extent that you're standing with him, you too are beyond the pale. You are behaving in a manner that's inconsistent with the values and the commitments of the university community. I could find the passage in Dean Ruger's letter where he says as much, but that's what I understand the indictment to be.
Okay, well, Glenn, I'll ask you one question. You don't need to answer it, okay? Does it matter what's true or not true? They call it race realism for a reason, and I'm not sitting here and telling you that I conclusively know what the sources of any differences, if any, are, because I don't conclusively know.
Okay.
But you know what? I am open-minded about it because I know that it is determined by facts that are beyond our wishes, our dreams, our hopes, and our control. All right. So that's what it means to be a race realist. So we need to make a decision about whether the truth matters. And that is a very important decision. Now, apropos of that and related to that, you say, well, if you agree or think that Jared Taylor is right about X and Y, and I'll leave aside the question of, whether we even know what Jared Taylor really thinks, apart from what we imagine he thinks. If you agree with him, then you are a threat to me. But let me turn that around and say, if you conclusively establish that we cannot think X, regardless of whether it turns out to be true or not, you're a threat to me. Does anybody care about that threat to me? I will expand that. All right. People say, well, I'm offended. This is offensive. Fire her. You have to get rid of her. Glenn, I'm offended every single day when I open up the New York Times. All right. When I read the stuff that's out there in the mainstream media, I'm upset. I'm offended. I'm quote unquote harmed, which I think is, bullshit. Of course, it's a misuse of the term harm. I am emotionally discomfited. All of the stuff that the people on the left claim that people on the right inflict on them is inflicted in the same way on people on the right. But why do their emotions and reactions never count? And here's the thing. The fact that I read stupid, idiotic, deceitful, offensive things in the New York Times, all right, attacking people I know, and I know that these are half-truths and lies, okay? I would never dream of saying, well, fire those people, get rid of them, cancel them, banish them, penalize them, punish them, because they wrote that stuff. That wouldn't cross my mind, right? So
I want to answer your question. Yes, the truth matters, obviously. Otherwise, what the fuck are we doing? We're wasting our time. If the truth doesn't matter, if the university is in the propaganda business, then please let me find another line of work, because that's why I came. That's the reason I showed up, was because I was interested in figuring this stuff out. So yes, the truth matters, absolutely. Let me say another thing. Education matters, pedagogy. I want young people to be capable of standing their ground and articulating their reasoned defenses of the value positions that they adopt in life, including your students. So if somebody is confronted by you and Jared Taylor, and they don't like, racial realism, then let's hear from them. The point of the whole enterprise is to teach them how to be able to stand up and to defend what they believe in. So if we respond to their cowering, trembling, infantilizing impotency in the face of hearing from a person like you or Jared Taylor by saying to you and Jared Taylor, shut up, don't offend our students, we are absolutely abandoning our brief as professors to educate our charges. So I agree with you.